Welcome, Vince. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
I'm glad we could finally talk you into coming.
I was trying to play hard to get, but I'm not.
So, Vince, you're a business coach. You have a unique approach. You've worked with a pretty wide array of businesses. You have an interesting background as well with the military.
Yes.
So, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us how you originally maybe got into, is it the Army? You're a paratrooper.
Yeah. Fast story is grew up with just my mom. Then my grandmother moved up. I grew up in Williams Lake, BC. So just my mom. My grandmother moved up when I was 3, I think, from the US. My aunt and uncle lived not far. So I was heavily influenced by my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt, and my uncle here and there. And to give you a bit of a picture, by the time I graduate grade 12, I've been to 10 schools.
Wow.
So I failed grade 2. And so that's a number of years in school. And by the time I'm in grade 6, I'm at my 8th school. And part of bouncing around so much is using humor as a mechanism to either make friends or get out of trouble. My mouth wrote checks, my body had to cash. And so I got picked on a lot. And so when I'm in grade 6, I learn about paratroopers. A classmate does this presentation on paratroopers jumping into Normandy, France on D-Day. And I think, that's it. I'm going to be a paratrooper. Because then, number 1, I can take care of myself. Number 2, I can hopefully protect somebody else. The only worst thing than getting picked on is watching someone else getting picked on and having no capacity to support. So from that moment forward, I was going to be in the military. I'm 19 when I joined the military. I'm 21 when I do my jump course. 22, I go to the Canadian Airborne Regiment. And at 20, I just turned 23, I'm deployed to Somalia, Africa. So I'm literally picking fights with bad guys. And that was my boyhood dream since I was 11 years old. So that was the fast track, sort of the fast story of how I ended up in the military. And I spent 7 years there, 4 of them as a paratrooper. And if I had to live life over again, there's a lot of things I would not repeat, but that would be it. I would definitely repeat the military. One of the best experiences and best educations that I've ever had.
So then what made you decide to retire from the military?
The regiment was disbanded. So in 1993, I'm deployed to Somalia. 1995, the regiment was disbanded. It was largely a political reason. The military, the airborne, the parachute regiment, it's a very expensive line item on the expense line for the military. And, there were some behavioral issues that the government thought the easiest way to, instead of fixing it, let's just cut it out. It'd be like if there was an incident in the Calgary police, well, let's just disband the Calgary police. It's too expensive anyways. I mean, it makes no sense. No army in the world disbands their special forces unit, but Canada did. So, yeah.
Interesting.
And so when it was ADHD. What was the question again? So when it was disbanded, I had a year left of my contract, and so it was had already spent 7 years. My renewal was for 13 years. So 13 years, do you want it or not? And I said, I'm going to take my chances on Civvy Street.
Okay. And then what was your next career path after that?
Sales. So in the military, just prior, I got back from Somalia in June 93, and in September 93, a friend of mine comes in to my room and says, "Hey, have you ever thought about owning your own business?" And I said, "Sure." He hands me a tape and a pamphlet. It turned out to be an Amway presentation. I knew jack about Amway other than my mother had SA8 laundry detergent. So the business model of distribution made sense to me. So I went for it, and I probably spent 7 years. So, I mean, there's lots of dark stories and unhappy stories about network marketing. But for me, I learned a lot of positives. I learned to read. I learned to associate with other good people. I learned to pay attention to other things beyond just Conan magazine, Playboy magazine, and one of the pieces of advice I got was where you are in the next 5 years is directly related to what you read, who you associate with, and who you listen to. And I just sort of did an inventory of my life, and I thought, well, yeah, I should probably tidy these things up. So that was a huge influence. When I got out of the military, a friend of mine who had introduced me to the Amway distribution model, he was already out of the military selling fax machines here in Calgary. I was in Edmonton, and he said, hey, I think they might be hiring. He helped me meet the manager. I got an interview, and I started selling fax machines 2 months after getting out of the military.
Wow.
Door to door. Hi, my name is Vince from Icon Office Solutions. Do you want to buy a fax machine? No? Got it. Next. So, yeah. That was, so I spent 9 years in sales after that. First with fax machines, then with law enforcement equipment. So I went from a 2-week sales cycle to a 2-year sales cycle in many cases, then to health club gym memberships for 2 years, then selling mascots for Glen Street here in Calgary, street characters. That was a lot of fun. I got recruited from there to go to a private school coaching athletics, specifically the rugby program at Edge School for athletes and helping out with their athletic program. So athletic coordinator, which is basically a gopher, help here, help there with our athletics program.
Awesome. And then how did you transition from an athletics coach into a business coach?
The best transition ever, unemployment. So in 2008, the economy tanks in Calgary, right?
Right.
Edge School for athletes, my role as athletic coordinator was absolutely a luxury item on the income statement. And a lot of things I was doing, I was helping out with phys ed, I was helping out here, helping out there, and it was an easily replaceable job, which is a very nice excuse of saying I didn't earn my position enough to keep it. So in private school, contracts are 1 year long, unlike public school where now you're in a union and once you're in, you're kind of in. So in 2009, when my contract was up for renewal, it did not get renewed. I spent the next 16 months unemployed, which was awesome. It was pretty much a reckoning, like who the hell am I? And ultimately led me to figure out what my next move was, which turned out to be coaching.
What made you decide to become a business coach? What need in the market did you see that you thought you'd be able to fill?
The decision was made for me by my wife. She said, if you don't get a job in 3 months, we're bankrupt by Christmas. This was 2010. So she's a very motivating person. And so I basically sat there and I said, okay, what are my tangible assets here? I have all this experience in sales, kind of marketing, positioning. I have all this experience in the military, in athletics, and in athletics I was already coaching. I was coaching youth rugby. I was coaching junior rugby. I was coaching senior men, senior women. I thought, well, what could I put them two together? For me, business was just a different scoreboard. It was the same. Everybody has a scoreboard. Business is just different than athletics, but it's a scoreboard nonetheless. In athletics, I always had a coach, always. And in the military, very much my senior NCOs, my officer corps, they're very much coaches versus managers. We have a saying in the military: you don't manage people, you manage data, you manage assets, you manage, but you lead people. So I thought, okay, I could. So these were my sort of coaching mentors, and I put my resume in space, not realizing it was a real industry or even an opportunity. I just kind of said business coach, and I got picked up by a firm here in Calgary. They're not around anymore, but the owner sold it, so the firm is still around under a new name. So I started with business edge coaching. I was there for a couple of years and decided it was time to go on my own, which was 2012, September 4, 2012.
How long did it take you for coaching to be a self-sustaining business, to be profitable?
Well, I was coaching within the firm. So in the firm, I had a base salary of, and then anything more than my salary provided, I would receive commissions on.
Okay.
So when I came back from my certification, which our certifying body was Action Coach, I was coaching literally the day I got home from training. And my first client was a referral. So that was, once I had that one, basically July 2011, I did really well that first month. I signed the most clients, the most revenue, the largest client that a rookie coach ever signed. I was amazing. Problem was I lost it all in 90 days. So like
Wow.
everybody left except for one client who was a friend and he didn't have any money. So it was a huge challenge, but I literally put all my coach training, my army training, my athletic training into my head and said, okay, how do we do this differently? How do we turn this around?
So what happened that those people left?
I was a number of things. One, I just didn't have the confidence. It was the largest client I had signed. I just didn't have the confidence to feel like I even belonged in the room. $52 million home building company. Like I had just zero confidence. Another, I was just a bad client for me. Yes, they needed coaching. I just wasn't the right client for them or the right coach for them. And I just didn't know how to, I probably said yes for the money versus having the confidence, thinking I can help anybody. Well, no, not everybody's my ideal client, but just the arrogance to think, oh, anybody, I can coach anybody. That's not true. So they pulled the chute. One said no more. A good friend of mine, actually, who we're still good friends today. He still has his business. So I wasn't that damaging, but I was just, instead of confident, I was just not as experienced as he needed. I think he was doing me a favor to say, sure, I'll hire you. See, but he needed more than I just didn't have enough experience in the game to probably be effective. So those are the three I can easily reflect on right away.
Okay. So then after that 90 days, I imagine that would have been somewhat shaking.
Yes.
How did you...
Holy shit, am I in the right industry? Oh my God, now what?
How did you come out of that dip?
I knew that, especially with the confidence piece, I knew that confidence comes from within. Confidence comes from experience and repetition. If you just think about your time in parkour and in the gym, you don't just walk in and just start doing jumps and lands and all these things. It's just, you need some reps. And so I just didn't have enough reps. So I knew I could get the reps. The second thing was there's a lot of negative narrative in my head at the time. And I thought, okay, I knew this lady who was back in the UK. She had a degree in psychology. Funny enough, I just had lunch with her today. She's a clinical hypnotherapist with a background in psychology. So I just phoned her up and I said, hey, I've got this story in my head. And the negative story, I can't afford it to either get in. And if it does get in, I can't afford it to stay in there. So what can we do? So I literally stole a credit card from my wife, had $1,000 limit. I dropped it all on Claire, kind of like going to Vegas, right? All black. And so I just bet on me. And so that got me 5 sessions with Claire at the time. And we just worked on confidence and that narrative inside.
Wow. And
slowly, piece by piece, within 6 months, I'd rebuilt my practice within the firm. And the rest, from the firm's perspective, things had turned around and I was doing really well.
So from that experience and your sessions with Claire, what are a couple, maybe like give us one example of something that made a really big difference for your confidence that other people who are doubting themselves could potentially apply, like whether it's something to think about or something to consider or an action you can take?
So I struggled with feelings of not enough. I barely graduated high school. I did well in classes that were hands-on. So shop, woodworking, metalworking, mechanics, athletics, as well as sciences, specifically physics. Because to me, it was just math and angles, and it was really, really interesting. But in English, social studies, socials I did okay, but English I really struggled, 51%. And again, zero university, right? So I basically walked around with a chip on my shoulder that, who's going to hire me if I don't have a degree in business? Well, the interesting thing is that Profit Magazine, I want to say it's about 5-6 years ago, published an article. I think 14% of people who own a business have something more than a university degree. So let's say an MBA or something more than that, and then about 26% had a university degree in any discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So like you could have a degree in basket weaving and open a business. The rest only had high school or mostly high school. So there was that data, and working with Claire, this feeling of enough was, so we worked extensively on where do these feelings of not enough come from? And under hypnosis, which, have you ever been?
No.
Never? Not even for entertainment?
No.
It's really cool, especially for entertainment. Highly recommend everyone try it. So for this particular case, you're just taking, closing your eyes and you're just breathing deeply. You're actually not asleep. People think you're asleep. You're not asleep. You're just really at rest. Your eyes open or closed. Mine would always be closed. And so the question was, when in your life did you perceive you were not enough? So I would pick a time and we would talk about it. And then this feeling of not enough would still linger. Okay, when was another time? And I would identify it. And I'd go back farther, and then she goes, okay. And then we'd work through that, and I'd still have this lingering feeling of not enough. And then all of a sudden she asked this question, was it before you were born or after you were born? In other words, were you in the womb or was it after you were born? And immediately I knew right away. The story goes, my mom came home, said, hey, Dad, I'm pregnant. And he said, okay, let's arrange for an abortion. And she said, nope, I'm going to keep it. So from the very beginning, I was never wanted. Now that's the story I've been told. I don't know if it's true, but it's the story I was told. It's the story I believed. And our behavior is based on what we believe. Mm-hmm. So that was the story I believed. So we went back to that. And then she has an incredible way of rewiring, just rewiring the way I think about that time. And I've never felt like I don't belong ever since. And that I can't even think of the day that was, but there's not a room that I can walk into or would walk into where I wouldn't feel like I belong in that room, because we all know something. You know more than I do on something. Alex knows something more. Sean knows something more. Andy knows something more. Everybody knows something. Even the guy on the street, the woman on the street, they know something that the rest of us don't. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
What is your approach to helping business owners? Because I've done work for, I don't know, a ton of coaches now, and I have no idea how I fell into that niche. But from the conversations we've had and the work I've done with other people, your approach seems different. It seems a little bit more on the psychology side. How do you approach helping your clients?
I rely heavily on my military experience, my athletic experience. In the military, everyone gets, if you think of, I guess the best way to have a picture in your mind is you've probably seen some movie about Navy SEAL training or Special Forces training, and in comes this person and they get crushed mentally and physically and they get spit out the other end, right? Mm-hmm. And almost always in that movie, it's very rarely a physical issue or a strategy issue. It's almost always a psychological issue that they've got to work through, some fear. They were afraid of the dark. They were afraid of heights. They were, whatever it was, community. In athletics, I watch all sorts of people, athletes that come into sport. And having worked at Edge School for Athletes, I learned from one of my colleague coaches was it's not the most talented person that goes to the NHL draft or the NFL draft and so on. It's the one that can play the game and the one who's there for their teammates and they're all in. So, but you've got to show up mentally and physically. And a lot of these kids were just showing up physically. Look how hard I can hit. Look how hard I can shoot. Look how hard I can, whatever it is, just using their physical abilities to manhandle the other athletes on the ice. But when other kids started to grow and catch up or even get bigger, all of a sudden that person couldn't use physical presence to dominate the game. So the same goes really in business. Anybody can go put a product or service out there and say it's for sale, but what do you do when no one buys it? What do you do when people buy it and then go online and say this sucks, this is a piece of shit? What do you do when staff steal from you? Where's the playbook on any of that? And what do you do when the economy tanks like it has? And why is it that some businesses will continue to thrive and others just literally blow up and implode? Especially when two businesses are selling the same service. In the oil and gas sector, you got two engineering firms. Why is one still around and the other one's not? They're both doing the exact same thing. The customers are all in the same market. So why? So it's no longer a strategy issue. It's a psychological issue. Now, initially I never knew this. The first thing that tipped me was a video on Business Insider by Tony Robbins. He said business is 80% psychology, 20% strategy. And I didn't believe him at first. I believe it now, but in the beginning I didn't. I thought, no, for sure, because it's got to be at least 50-50, but I think it's definitely in the 80-20 realm. The second thing is I started reading different books. So go back to those Amway days. They said what you read, who you listen to, who you associate with, that will determine who you become in the next 3 to 5 years. So unknowingly, I was reading mostly books on the subject of positive and organizational psychology. So Carol Dweck on mindset, Angela Duckworth on grit, Brene Brown, not so much a psychologist, more of a social worker, and pretty much everything she's written. Kelly McGonigal on willpower instinct. So I've been reading all these books. I applied for positive psychology, got accepted, took it. And what I've learned is that, again, strategy is important. It's how do we navigate self-doubt, uncertainty, adversity, opportunity, shiny object syndrome, ADHD, and saying yes too many times. How do we navigate all of that and still be successful in business? And to me, the ones that are successful are the ones that can navigate those areas really, really well. So why other coaches aren't playing that space, I don't know, but that's where I play, and that's absolutely what I love. Don't cut this part out.
So what are some mistakes, and maybe answer this from your area of expertise, which is the psychological side, that you see a lot of business owners making on a regular basis?
The first one absolutely is the belief that vulnerability is weakness. And maybe before that, the misunderstanding of what vulnerability is. Vulnerability isn't, hey, pull up my shirt and show off this big wound in my ribs because I fell over on my skateboard. It's more like, if we look at how Brene Brown defines vulnerability, it's emotional exposure, risk, and uncertainty. So it sounds like this. All right, team. So business owner speaks up. All right, team. There's some changes in the market, which makes our product slightly irrelevant all of a sudden. And I'm uncertain how we're going to go about it, but I know we have enough smart people on the bus that we can find a solution. That's emotional exposure. I have no clue what we're going to do just yet. I'm working on it. That's uncertainty. What are they going to do once they hear these words come out of my mouth? And it's risk. We can't do something great without risk, right? So another one might be, I've decided to, everyone comes into work on a Monday and they notice they're missing the general manager. And the general manager is also the wife of one of the employees. Hey, everybody. I've had to fire our general manager on the weekend. And I'm not 100% sure that was the right decision to make. It felt right based on parameters 1, 2, 3, 4. And while I hope you all stay, I understand if this upsets any of you, especially you, Todd, being that was your mother, although I'm sure in this particular case, Todd would have been spoken to. And so that's vulnerability. Hey, the economy's changing. Yes, I'm nervous too. Here's my plan. Here's what we're going to go do. What ideas do you have? That's emotional exposure. Positioning yourself is, I don't have all the answers. So that's mistake number one, not believing that vulnerability is a weakness. Mistake number 2 is not having a clearly defined vision, mission, and core values to live by. So vision is, what does the world look like? It doesn't right now. Like, what's missing in the world right now that my business has to exist? So for me, I envision a world where small business owners have the courage to pursue a life that's meaningful to them. I know far too many business owners who just do what they think the market wants, not what they actually want to do. So whose life are they living? The mission is just how we're going to get there. And values are how we govern our organization. How do we make decisions? If, not to say, oh, hey, we believe in integrity and we believe in planning and we believe in, but what does integrity look like in action? Put it into a verb, give us some behavior that makes sense, that we can model integrity. Otherwise, that's just a word. And then filter all decisions through those values. We have a customer who completely compromises our corporation's vision, mission, and values. Well, we should fire the customer. No, they represent 5% of our annual revenue. Who fucking cares? They're toxic. Or it's a staff member, or it's a vendor, or it's a landlord, or whatever. Like, make decisions based on values, not based on what it says on the income statement. And too many people focus on the income statement as the balance sheet to make decisions, as well as values. Like, use both, not just the income statement, right? So those are two right there. They're, the list is on: hire too soon, fire too late, scale too soon, scale too early, increase product line too soon, not diversify enough. Like, after that, the sky's the limit.
Right.
Chasing too many balls. Mark Cuban said, entrepreneurs drown in opportunity all the time. Hey, we should do this, and this. How about we get really good at, Coke? We just make Coke. And then when they were $1 billion company, they started popping off other products and services. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, just get profitable.
Yeah.
So
you've now been a business coach for a while. You're quite established.
Yeah.
You've done the measurable difference. I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah.
Speaking
it's dead
series.
now. Thanks for reminding me.
Sorry. We're replacing it with something
we're replacing it. It's
newer.
It's being replaced.
Shinier.
Yeah. Something newer and shinier, I guess.
So now that you've had that experience in your industry, you've worked with a big range of clients, you have some really cool clients. What have been your more recent struggles, or maybe your biggest, more recent struggle that you've had to overcome?
The hands down, the most challenging struggle I've had is navigating the psychological mindfuck of learning that my father is not my father. So growing up with my mom, right? Just my mom. She married Ralph Fowler when I was 11. And when I was 17, I said, hey, who's my real dad? So she said, it's this guy, John Grant. Beautiful man, wonderful man. 3 daughters and a son. Him and his wife, they took me in and they're like, hey, welcome to the family. Like, just really like, come on in. You're one of us. Mm-hmm. Introduced me to aunts and uncles and all sorts of stuff. A year ago, my wife had got me, so Christmas 17, my wife had gotten me Ancestry DNA for Christmas. Shits and giggles gift, right? Because I don't know a lot about my family tree on both sides. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of less knowing on my father's side. So when the results came in, the results did not support that John Grant was my father. Somebody else, a guy named Don Brecknock. So yeah, I'm Vince Brecknock. If you ever heard of Brecknock Castle in Wales, it's my castle. So our family goes back to like 1400s. It's like somebody has collected all this genealogy stuff. But now I have to call John Grant and say, hey, guess what? You really aren't my dad. And he says, I don't care. I'm still calling you son. And I said, I don't care. I'm still calling you dad. Had to call my sisters, right? My stepdad was actually the biggest advocate to help me figure this out. So our relationship has only strengthened. And then just learning I have 3 brothers and another sister. So getting to know them, plus aunts, plus uncles, 2 cousins in Calgary. Wow. One was just over on the weekend for dinner with her boyfriend. So that was nice. My other cousin, she owns, her and her husband, Jarvis, they own a gallery here in Calgary. They're business owners. That's kind of cool. My sister has a daughter who plays rugby. I have a daughter who plays rugby. Wow. So, and my other cousin has a daughter who plays on Canada U17 as being, looked at for higher levels of Rugby Canada. So it's crazy to see that I played a lot of rugby. My daughter's playing rugby's over there too. But that's a huge emotional mind bender. So here I am, let's say you and I are working together. In the back of my mind, I've got this narrative going on, like who am I? Who is my daddy and what does he do? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm supposed to be present with you, helping you work through your stuff. So maintaining some mental discipline through all of that, it's gotten a lot better, but it's by far been the most challenging thing I have ever experienced in certainly the last number of years.
Wow. How do you segregate your work from those things? Like, how do you compartmentalize so that it doesn't affect your clients?
I can't compartmentalize for very long. I can do it for about the hour, but after that, I give myself permission. So when I commute, I give myself permission to go wherever I need to go. Compartmentalizing has its benefits. If you think of a military deployment, I go overseas. Back then I was married, not to my current wife, to do the job and remain focused for me, my teammates, and the job at hand, which is very risky. I've got to shut everything off that's back home. And maybe when the patrol's over, or maybe that night, I might read a book or read a letter. I might allow myself to escape back in and recognize these two realities. But I didn't do that this time. So I allow myself to experience anything I need to experience in between the sessions, and my sessions are 90 minutes. The second thing I do is I was facilitating a retreat for an EO group, so Entrepreneurs Organization. We went down to Sedona they were there for 5 days. I was there for the first 3. And this was still really fresh news for the most part. It's only about 6-7 months old. So I actually roll my story into my facilitation in a very tactful way that helps demonstrate how psychology plays a role in the way we show up. So, for example, in the absence of data, the brain makes up a story. I don't know a lot about why my mom did what she did. I still don't to this day. And if I allow myself, the brain will make up a story automatically. Your brain makes up stories all day. Yeah. For example, you submit a proposal. You assume, hey, just here's the proposal. Here's what we agreed to. Yeah, just sign the dotted line and we'll get started next week like we talked. But they ghost you for a week. What are you thinking? You've been ghosted. Even though you said you've got the deal, they've ghosted you. What are some stories that show up?
I would imagine one of them would be that they found someone else that they're going with. Yeah. Even though there's no real data to back that up.
Yeah, where's the evidence to support that thing, right? And all of a sudden they surface and we go, oh, sorry, I got distracted, blah, blah, blah. In the absence of data, the brain makes up a story. It does this for a couple of reasons. One, brain's constantly trying to self-protect. The brain is built for survival, not thrival. So it's constantly in self-protect mode. Oh, they ghosted me because they're jerks. They, screw them. I'm better than them anyways, right? The brain goes into self-protection mode. The second thing is our brain likes a beginning, middle, and end. It likes a whole story because it's chemically rewarded. There's a little dopamine hit we get when we get a full story. So when I share my experience, hey, who's here ever been ghosted, right? I'll tell you about a 31-year ghosting. But it's dangerous because if we behave based on what we now believe, based on this false data or no data at all, how might you behave if you really believe they went with someone else? How might you behave the next time you email them or speak to them, or how might you behave?
It might be negatively. That would become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, it might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's really important that when we run businesses, there's all sorts of stories to make up. Why is so-and-so late? Oh, they must be stopping for coffee. I told him never stop for coffee when he's late for work. Just get here and we'll have coffee here. Something simple as that. Or, you know what? They're late. I heard there was an accident on the radio. Oh my God, I hope they weren't involved in that accident. Sounds like it was in the same community. Hurry up. Get Susan on the line. Find out if she was in that accident. Like in the absence of data, the brain makes up this story. So how does that behavior play out if we believe the story? So I found a way to tactfully roll in my experiences in life as a lesson to pull out their story, which, by the way, is vulnerability. Like, it's massive emotional exposure, right? I got to talk about something I thought most everybody knows who their dad is. Majority. There's a lot of people that don't. Second, how are they going to take this? Are they going to take this as too touchy-feely? Are they going to take this as, dude, we didn't need to know that? How are they going to take it? And it was received incredibly well.
So to kind of continue on from that, you did a TED Talk. And in this TED Talk, you explained a system. Can you briefly explain that system? Because that to me was really fascinating. I actually really appreciate that TED Talk, and I'll put a link to it with the episode.
So it's called the Framework for Mastery. And when I first started coaching, a colleague of mine said it was vision, plan, execute. It was this triangle, and we would draw this in any new client consultation. What's the vision? What's the plan? Now go execute. And I thought vision was important, but it was incomplete. I thought, we need clarity. Very like during a deployment, during a rugby game, what does success look like? So clarity's crystal clear. Now tell me about the purpose. So I get that this is important, but what's the purpose of that? What's the cause behind it? What does long-term progress look like? And then, so he had clarity, he had vision, plan, execute. And then also thought, well, hold on, let's talk about data, relevant data. We need to look at any available relevant data to before we plan. It's part of the planning process. Certainly in the military and athletics, there's all sorts of data that we need to know and understand before we do things. And now let's go execute. And then execution creates more data. So let's make sure we store that data. And then let's debrief this thing. So I essentially expanded on this very initial vision, plan, execute piece. And I was sitting in a workshop that I was running, and one of the attendees was asking a question, and he was already a very successful financial planner, and he was offered an opportunity to brand his own wealth management company within the confine or the construct of the mothership investors group. So he said, anybody I've known who has gone on to create their own personal brand, private wealth, they seem to sacrifice family time. And he's a new father, not necessarily newly married, but they've been together for a long time, just married in the last couple of years, but brand new father. And if success, having my own private wealth, means I don't get to see my family, I don't want to do it. And she goes, well, that's just your story. Turns out she was a psychotherapist. I was like, what? Say that again? Story? What's the story you're talking about? And she goes, the story is the thing that you make up to believe to be true. No? Cold calling's a waste of time. It doesn't work. Story. People will never buy my service on the first conversation. Story. The NDP is going to ruin Alberta. Story. The UCP is going to ruin Alberta. Story. Calgary's the best city to be in business in. Story. True or not, it's still a story. So it's up to the individual to determine, my marriage isn't worth saving. Story, because I know other marriages that have gone through hell and back 3 times and they're still together and they've flourished. So again, it's all story. Mm-hmm. So where my TED Talk finishes is where story begins. And at the TED Talk, I thought story belonged between planning and execution, mostly because I witnessed people resistant to raising prices. And their belief is that if we raise prices, our customers will leave. Well, that's just story. Where's the evidence to support that? So I thought story belonged there, but story is all over that whole thing. There's a story after the result. If the result isn't what we looked for, we defend the bad result with story. We start debriefing and, this was a terrible idea. This was a terrible hotel to work with. Story. No one actually spoke to the catering manager. No one actually spoke to food and beverage to make sure things were on time. So story. Whatever. So story belongs everywhere. And that's where, back to that Tony Robbins piece, that if success is 20% strategy, that's everything above that circle. And 80% psychology, that's that whole story narrative. So while strategy is really important, and you cannot win a rugby game without it, the narrative in our head before we even leave the locker room better not be how much are we going to lose this game by. Because that is a bullshit story. The game is lost before we even step on the pitch. And that's the team I used to play for sometimes. My club would behave that way. They don't do that anymore. They seem to always be in the city finals. But we can't leave the locker room thinking we're going to lose before we've even stepped out of the locker room. That's story, and that will kill any opportunity to win. Mm-hmm. Same in business. So
amazing. So you have a couple projects on the go now, a couple new little side things you're launching. Do you want to tell us a bit about those?
So the first one is a measurable difference. We put a fork in that. That's dead. It was a great run, 6 years. My version of TED Talks to support the small business owner. I've really fallen in love with Brene Brown's work, and she quotes Roosevelt in the Man in the Arena speech. And so it's going to be rebranded to Arena Talks. So very similar premise, but it's all about the entrepreneur in the arena. What is the story we make up? What are the battles we fight? Who survives to win another day, to fight another day? So it's going to be that. And it'll probably start as a podcast before an actual talk. So wait out on that. The second thing is the business of coaching. I started the business of coaching a year ago, picked up its pace last September. And I just, in my own experience, I found myself lacking enough connections in the coaching industry for the purpose of referral, for the purpose of just community and connection. So I thought, well, if it doesn't exist, I'll make it. So I created the business of coaching. We do it every 2 months. So the next one's June 17. And we'll take the summer off. I'd like to do a summit of some kind here in November. So that's a sort of a short-term goal. And then the third thing is Trep Life Academy. There are people who I've had to say no to working with me simply because of a funding model. I resist saying they can't afford me. They're just not at the level where I can do my best work, let's say. However, collectively, if we had 10 business owners who were in similar situation, and let's just say anywhere between 100 and 700,000 in revenue, because that's what the last cohort had, we can leverage each other a whole lot better than I can on my own. And so I facilitate a 10-month curriculum. We talk about the challenges that all businesses experience in those first years, in those younger revenues, as well as the psychology of business. So I've put together a few different things to help with that whole psychology piece, because again, I don't see it being done, certainly not in Calgary.
And what's your goal for both your coaching and your personal life 10 years from now?
Still doing the same thing on a larger scale. Simon Sinek has a book out called The Infinite Game, and I seen an interview between him and Inc. magazine reporter. He talks about how most business owners don't recognize the game they're playing. They think they're playing the finite game. So sports would be a finite game. It's got a beginning and an end, and there's a clear winner. At the end, there's a Super Bowl, and we know for a fact that the New England Patriots are the definitive Super Bowl championships, right? Business isn't the same thing. Business is an infinite game. It's long-term progress, trying to solve a human problem. And with or without me, that problem will be worked on by somebody. Now, who wins the game? Whoever wins is completely arbitrary. Even I would argue the Chamber Awards are still, as much as there's some subjectivity to it, it's still very much arbitrary. So we're in the infinite game. Instead of looking at specifically what success looks like, I've come to the idea of what does long-term progress look like. So I believe I'll coach until the day I can't. I'll just coach less. I will continue to speak. I'll speak until the day I can't. I will just speak less as I get older. I look at, there's Warren Buffett. The guy still speaks. He's 1,000 years old, right? He probably speaks less than he used to. So I'll just coach and speak less because it's something I really love to do. And it's not significantly demanding physically. I'm not building houses, right? I'm not a massage therapist or a chiropractor who's constantly using their body as an instrument to treat the patient. So I foresee I'll continue to coach businesses one-on-one with owners who have a human problem they want to solve, with a cause that they exponentially believe in. And they look at coaching as, well, why wouldn't I have a coach? Versus someone says, well, here's the problem I want to solve. Let's just go, I need to X. I can still do that. But I prefer that person that says, I'm not going to war without a coach, a lawyer, an accountant, and a psychologist on a speed dial, right? And a good bookkeeper and a good massage therapist, right? And a good videographer and a good marketing person, right? Yeah. Where they view coaching as an asset along the way, which big businesses figured out. Big business like Imperial Oil has coaches on staff now. GE has coaches on staff now. So small business isn't there yet. for a couple reasons. One, it's a bit of a buy-in. Second, it's a monetary challenge for some, for certain. And then take Trep Life Academy and just scale that. So right now it's in real life, but it'll eventually lead to some sort of online solution. So people can, whether it's a course or whatever, there'll be an opportunity to access knowledge through the way we believe. And there's lots of examples out there, the people that already do it. I just do it differently.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciated you telling your story and
thanks for asking.
Laying down some insights.
Thank you. Yeah, you have a good thing going, so keep at it.
Thank you.
Long-term progress.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Our first sponsor is Syndication, which is a video production company that I started. We do video production and online marketing for businesses of all sizes, ranging from solopreneurs to Fortune 500 companies. Our second sponsor is Gravity Cafe. They've been gracious enough to give us their space. The coffee's awesome. They have live music 3 nights a week. The beer's great. It's an awesome place to come hang out. Our next sponsor is Flagship Business Brokers. Flagship Business Brokers provides entrepreneurs with support through the purchase, sale, or financing of a business. They have a proven track record of delivering fast, cost-efficient, and client-focused transactions. Another sponsor of the Ambition Project is BusinessLink. BusinessLink is Alberta's entrepreneurial hub. They are a nonprofit organization that helps people navigate the steps towards starting their own businesses. Just because you're in business for yourself doesn't mean you're in business by yourself. BusinessLink's team of in-house startup experts are there to support you all along the way. Our next sponsor is the Better Business Bureau. Your BBB helps businesses build visibility, credibility, savings, leads, and community through BBB accreditation while funding free marketplace services with more than 1 million instances of service to consumers every year. Visit bbb.org/Calgary to learn more today.